These are your champions.
I'm Sonya. That's Kano.
I'm Liu Kang.
Name's Jax.
Kung Lao. Lord Raiden. The fate of Earth is in our hands.
Hey guys, Smiling Reviewer here, and today we are talking about Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat is a fantasy action film directed by Simon McQuoid in his directorial debut based on the notorious video game series of the same name. I say notorious because the fame this game grew on was due to the excessive violence shown in it, so it would make sense that this movie needed to have an R rating. The movie is essentially about two worlds at war, Earthrealm, which is Earth, against Outworld, and these two worlds need to compete in a fighting tournament called Mortal Kombat. But Outworld, being the bad guys, are trying to murder all their opponents before the tournament can take place. So yeah, extremely wacky storyline, but it's also the reason why I was so excited for this movie. I loved these games as a kid, and the main reason I loved these games was because of the vast array of different characters that are present in the game. There are so many unique and awesome characters in this universe that I just couldn't wait to see kick some ass on the big screen. The movie starts out really strong, introducing the characters of Hanzo Hasashi, also known as Scorpion, played by Hiroyuki Sanada, and Bihan, also known as Subzero, played by Joe Taslim. And these two guys were the reason I was so hopeful for this movie. As soon as I heard these guys were cast as their respective characters, I was honestly overjoyed, because not only do these guys fit these characters so well, but these are two phenomenal actors who also know how to fight. Firstly, Hiroyuki Sanada. Hollywood, please just put this guy in every movie you can. This is an underrated actor that I've just adored for such a long time, and I feel he has just such an immense screen presence. Secondly, Joe Taslim. This guy is an absolute powerhouse. He's an incredible martial artist that I can't wait to see what else he shows up in. I first saw him in 2011's Indonesian film The Raid, which, if you haven't seen, what are you doing? It's literally like one of the best action films of all time. Speaking of The Raid, I feel like they honestly should have got the team behind that movie to choreograph this movie, because the fight scenes in that movie are just so brutal and so good. And I think this movie could have benefited from that, but I'll get more onto that later on. Scorpion and Sub-Zero's opening that introduced their rivalry was easily the best storyline of the movie. However, this storyline is also like 10% of the movie, which is a bit awkward. After that opening, we're introduced to newcomer Cole Young, played by Louis Tan, who is actually the main protagonist of the movie and is not an existing character in the Mortal Kombat universe, but rather a new character they made for the movie. And this is honestly where the movie begins to go downhill. I felt like this character and his family were just never interesting, especially when you have these larger than life characters like a Thunder God. It feels almost underwhelming to be following these other ordinary and unfortunately boring characters. But as they go on their journey, they begin to meet characters who are famous from the Mortal Kombat game roster, such as Jax, Sonya Blade, Kano, Liu Kang, and Kung Lao. Jax and Sonya I also thought were such boring characters, unfortunately. Jax at least had some ridiculous lines that we could laugh at, but Sonya was the same as Cole in the sense that she was just so one note, and they never did anything interesting with her character to justify her presence. Liu Kang and Kung Lao, I was so excited to see these guys on the big screen, and these guys are just so awesome. I mean, look at them, for God's sake. When I first saw them, I was like, yes, they've done the characters justice. They look incredible and are portrayed by actors who really seem dedicated to the characters. But as the movie went on, I realized these characters were reduced to just exposition machines. There was very little, honestly quite possibly no character development with these guys. Rather, they were just there to feed the audience information, which was super disappointing. The absolute standout of the film, though, who I never would have guessed, was Kano, played by Josh Lawson. Every single line that came out of Kano's mouth had me and my mate who I watched this in cinemas with absolutely rolling. And honestly, Josh Lawson kind of carried the movie. I think had his character not been in this movie, the second act of the movie, where they're trying to get to Raiden's temple to train for this tournament, and when they do begin training, it would have been significantly more boring without Kano's over-the-top wit and charisma. I know I'm sounding really negative about this movie so far, and I actually didn't hate this movie. I did really enjoy it, but I don't know. I felt like this movie kept getting really close to being a great movie, and I wanted so bad for this to be a great movie as well. I was always on its side. And the ideas and the passion are definitely there. It just never quite hit that mark, unfortunately. And I think one of the reasons for that was the writing. The writer of this movie, Greg Russo, said in an interview that the inclusion of this newcomer, Cole Young, was a studio-mandated decision, because the studio wanted a fresh new character that could enter this universe for the first time like our audience would. And while I don't think that's necessary at all, because Mortal Kombat just has an absolute laundry list of interesting and unique characters you could pull from, but even despite that, I didn't mind the reasoning behind his inclusion in the movie, but I did mind the way that the character was presented and how he was written. He was just so wooden, and I really felt like I didn't care about him or his family, like, whatsoever. Another issue I had with the movie was the editing and some of the choreography. A lot of the fight scenes were pretty serviceable, if not a bit above serviceable, for your standard Hollywood flick, that is. But considering this is a Mortal Kombat movie, I think they needed the fight scenes to really be at a gold standard, because that's basically the essence of the entire movie. It's based on a fighting game about a fighting tournament. The movie utilized really quick-cut editing in most of the fights, which confused me because usually when Hollywood adopts this style of editing, it's because they have actors who don't actually know how to fight, so it's their way of trying to mask it. Mortal Kombat, however, very much has actors who know how to fight. So I think using quick-cut editing in these fights was unnecessary and just ended up being a disservice to the skill and effort that the actors put into these fights. And I just felt like they could have been a lot more impressive. Also, some of the final fights in the movie during the third act, the placement of them just felt really off, you know? Like, there's 4 different fights that are basically happening simultaneously, and the movie just keeps jumping back and forth between these fights that are all in different locations, which was a really cool idea because it did feel like the game almost. But having them all occur at the same time and switching back and forth, it really affected the momentum and pacing of each of these fights, in my opinion. And not only that, but I felt like the fights were too quick. You know, like, all the fights felt like short standard tussles with a very violent ending. And those gruesome fatalities were definitely awesome to watch, but sometimes they just didn't feel like they were completely earned. But rather they were just put in there for a bit of fan service. I just feel like the fights should have felt a bit more brutal and really embraced that R rating throughout rather than just at the very end of the fight. I think where this movie faltered is I really think it needed some more setup movies before reaching this point in the story. Because Mortal Kombat is such a large-scale world with so much lore, and the only reason that I know that is because I'm familiar with the video game universe. But if you aren't familiar with the game universe, it's all introduced in this movie so fast, some with little to no explanation. It really expects the audience to just trust the filmmakers with these grand ideas without much explanation. But it never quite gives the audience a good enough reason to hand over their trust. Personally, I don't mind if a story seems a little lackluster if it's made up for in another department. For example, the recent Godzilla vs. Kong storyline was very questionable and felt a bit sloppy, but it was completely made up for when the big dumb fight happened at the end, which was so ridiculously entertaining. And while Mortal Kombat does have entertaining fights, none of the fight scenes were memorable, which was kind of disappointing. Like, if I were to watch it again, there's no one scene where I would be like, man, I have to go back and watch that one fight again. In saying that, I'm still very much looking forward to a sequel and seeing where they take the story and characters, because I think there is so much promise and potential with what they've done so far, and if they improve some of the writing and make the fights more brutal, I think it could be something really special. So all in all, Mortal Kombat gets a 6 out of 10 for me. I think a major reason I enjoyed it was nostalgia, and also being able to pick up on the many Easter eggs scattered throughout the movie. The movie very much feels like it's made for fans of the video game, but unfortunately at times it almost feels like it's made only for fans, because if you're not familiar with the Mortal Kombat universe at all, I honestly think you'll be a bit confused by a lot of the things that are happening in the movie and struggle to follow it a bit. But it really does have so much potential to be an incredible cinematic experience, and I also feel like they've got all the right ingredients there. It's just a matter of how they end up putting them together. But I'm definitely rooting for them to be able to get there. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I really enjoyed talking about this one with you guys, and I hope you enjoyed listening, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later, guys.
Fight! Get over here! Excellent! Get over here! Finish him! Get over here! Sucker!